Mob enforcer lost his job for helping an old woman, but her beautiful granddaughter was a billionaire and did something unexpected. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story, and I want to get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The oppressive August heat suffocated Chicago as Jack Sullivan stepped out of the black sedan on Maxwell Street. It was 5 in the afternoon, and the hustle was already dying down in the area, but St. Anne's Pharmacy was still open, its fogged glass door and the flickering neon sign spelling out "open" in faded blue letters. He adjusted the black shirt that stretched over his broad chest and checked his phone one more time. The collection was simple: $2,500 from an account 3 months overdue. Nothing he hadn't done hundreds of times before. At 35, Jack carried the marks of a life built in the shadows. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow was a souvenir from a prison fight at 20. His calloused hands knew the weight of a gun as well as they knew the weight of cement bags from his days as a mason before crime became more profitable than honest work. His broad shoulders moved with the confidence of someone who learned early on that respect in the neighborhood is won by force, and that survival depended on never showing fear. As Marcus Thorne's right-hand man, he controlled a considerable slice of the outfit's business in the city center. Money laundering through commercial establishments, protecting territories, collecting debts, and supervising the drug spots between the Loop and the West Side. It was a job that demanded discipline, absolute loyalty, and the ability to make tough decisions without flinching. Jack had learned all these lessons on the streets of the South Side, where he was born and raised, watching the weak get devoured by urban violence. He pushed the pharmacy door and a small bell chimed, announcing his arrival. The air conditioning was barely working, and the smell of medicine mixed with the sweat of the owner, Mr. Peterson, a thin man in his 60s, who knew Jack's reputation well. The pharmacist's eyes darted from the scale where he was weighing medication to the serious face of his visitor, and an immediate tension filled the room. "Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson." Jack's voice was deep, controlled, unhurried. "I came to talk about that pending matter." The man swallowed hard and nodded, his trembling hands putting away the small medicine bottles. "Jack, son, I know I'm behind, but—" "3 months," he interrupted, resting his hands on the peeling laminate counter. 3 months without a word, without a call, without showing up. Marcus is losing his patience, and you know how he is." At that moment, a fragile voice was heard from the back of the pharmacy. "Please, son, just a little more time. It's for Leo's medicine. He's in the hospital." Jack turned his head and saw an elderly woman bent over a shopping cart full of expensive medications. Mrs. Eleanor had white hair tied in a simple bun, wrinkles that told stories of a lifetime of hard work, and simple but clean clothes. Her arthritic hands clutched a crumpled prescription as she pleaded with the pharmacist with a dignity that touched something deep in Jack's chest. "Mrs. Eleanor, you know I respect you, but it's almost $800. "I can't keep giving extensions like this," the pharmacist replied, clearly embarrassed but firm. The woman lowered her head, and Jack saw a tear run down her wrinkled face. "Leo is only 12, you know? He's my grandson. He has pneumonia and needs these medicines. I've already sold everything I could. I've borrowed money from everyone I know." Something stirred in Jack's chest, a feeling he had learned to suffocate long ago. He remembered his own grandmother, who raised him after his mother died of an overdose when he was 8. He remembered the night she scrimped on her own food to buy his asthma medicine, the time she got sick and didn't have money for proper treatment. The memory came with unexpected force, bringing back a humanity he believed he had buried, along with the first men he killed. "How much do you need?" he asked, surprising everyone in the pharmacy, including himself. Mrs. Eleanor raised her tear-reddened eyes. $800, son, but I can't accept charity. That's not how I was raised. It's not charity, Jack replied, pulling his wallet from his pocket. It's an investment. You'll owe me lunch when Leo gets out of the hospital. He counted the money onto the counter, ignoring Mr. Peterson's astonished look. It was $800 from his own pocket, money he had set aside for other collections that afternoon. Mrs. Eleanor stared at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, as if she couldn't believe that a man with Jack's intimidating appearance could perform such a kind gesture. God will bless you for this, my son, she whispered, holding his hands with surprising strength. What's your name? Jack. Jack, you look like you've suffered a lot in life, but you have a good heart. I can see it. He helped her carry the medicines to the bus stop, where he waited with her until the bus arrived. During those minutes, Mrs. Eleanor told him about Leo, about how she was raising her grandson alone since her daughter died in a car accident, about the challenges of being a grandmother and a mother at the same time. She also talked about her other granddaughter, Ava, who was always busy with work, but always took care of the family. When he returned to settle accounts with Mr. Peterson, Jack had no idea he had sealed his own fate. The pharmacist, relieved by the resolution of the problem, paid his debt on time and even offered him a cup of coffee. But it was only the following Monday that the consequences of his act of kindness began to surface. The phone rang at 6 in the morning. Marcus on the other end, his voice filled with a cold anger Jack knew well. "Where are you? People are saying you were playing Santa Claus in a pharmacy yesterday. Tell me this story straight." Jack was in the kitchen of his Lincoln Park apartment making coffee when he realized his life was about to fall apart. He had always known that in the world of crime there was no room for weakness, and acts of kindness were interpreted as exactly that. Signs that a man was losing focus, getting soft, becoming a risk to the organization. It was just a specific situation, Marcus. An old lady needing medicine for her hospitalized grandson. It didn't interfere with business, didn't interfere. Jack, you used collection money to pay for charity. That's not in your character, man. And when a man's character changes, he becomes unpredictable. An unpredictable man is a dangerous man. The call ended with a clear message. A meeting at the workshop at 2 in the afternoon. Jack knew that tone. He had heard it before when other members of the organization needed to be reassigned. Some were transferred to other duties. Others simply disappeared. He spent the morning organizing his personal documents, transferring the money he had saved to an account the organization didn't know about, and writing a letter to be delivered to Mrs. Eleanor in case something happened. It wasn't fear he felt, but a strange sense of peace. For the first time in many years, he had done something his grandmother would have approved of. The workshop was in an abandoned warehouse on the west side, a place that served both to chop stolen cars and to resolve the outfit's internal problems. When Jack arrived, he found Marcus accompanied by 3 other men, all with the grim faces that indicated the meeting would not be friendly. "Sit down, Jack," Marcus pointed to a plastic chair in the middle of the warehouse. "We're going to have a serious talk about the future." The conversation in the warehouse lasted 2 hours and changed everything. Marcus was direct. Jack had become a calculated risk. 17 years of loyalty, hundreds of successful operations, millions of dollars moved without a single failure. All of this weighed on the scale. But the act of kindness towards Mrs. Eleanor also weighed, and in the world of organized crime, feelings were a luxury few could afford. "You've always been my right-hand man," Marcus said, lighting a cigarette as he circled the chair where Jack remained seated. "But now I don't know who you are anymore. And if I don't know who you are, how can I trust you won't turn me over to the cops when the pressure's on?" The proposal was simple and terrible. Jack had 24 hours to disappear from the city. He could take the money he had managed to save honestly over the years, but he had to forget any connection to Chicago, any attempt to contact old partners, family, or acquaintances would be interpreted as a threat and met with violence. And if I refuse, Jack asked, already knowing the answer, then you don't leave here alive. Jack accepted the exile, not out of fear of death, but because he realized this was his chance to find a different life. At 35, for the first time since his teens, he was free from the shackles of organized crime. Free, but also completely alone and without prospects. He spent the night packing his few personal belongings in the Lincoln Park apartment. Clothes, a few books he read during sleepless nights, photographs of his grandmother, and a small fortune in cash he had hidden over the years. He was about to call a cab to the airport when he remembered Mrs. Eleanor. He couldn't disappear without at least knowing if Leo was recovering. The Englewood neighborhood at 7 in the morning was bustling with people rushing to make a living. Jack parked his car in front of the housing complex where Mrs. Eleanor lived and climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. The door was slightly ajar, and he heard voices coming from the kitchen. "Grandma, are you sure this man is trustworthy?" a female voice asked. "The way you describe him, it sounds like." "Ava, my dear, you judge people too much by their appearance. Jack has a good heart. I felt it the moment I looked into his eyes." Jack knocked on the door and waited. Hurried footsteps, and then Mrs. Eleanor appeared with a radiant smile on her face. "Jack, my son, come in, come in. I was just telling my granddaughter about you." He hesitated at the door. Through the entrance, he could see a piece of the modest but impeccably clean living room, with simple but well-cared-for furniture. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries came from the kitchen, creating a cozy atmosphere he hadn't felt in years. "Mrs. Eleanor, I just came to check on Leo. How is he?" "Better, thank God, and you. The medicine worked, and he's already home recovering. But come in, for heaven's sake, don't just stand there at the door." Jack entered and was led to the kitchen, where he had the first shock of his life. Sitting at the laminate table was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Dark brown hair fell in natural waves over her shoulders, framing a face with delicate but striking features. Gray-green eyes analyzed him with a piercing intelligence, a light-tan skin that glowed with natural health. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, but there was something in her posture, in the way she held her coffee cup, that betrayed sophistication. "Ava, this is the Jack I told you about. Jack, my granddaughter Ava." She stood up to greet him, and Jack noticed that, even though she was tall, she had to look up to meet his eyes. Her handshake was firm, confident, and lasted a second longer than necessary. "A pleasure to meet you," Ava said, and her voice had a velvety quality that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. "Grandma told me what you did. It was very generous." "It was nothing," he replied, feeling strangely nervous. He was used to controlling situations, to intimidating when necessary, but in the presence of this woman, he felt like an awkward teenager. Mrs. Eleanor insisted he have breakfast with them. For the next 40 minutes, Jack experienced something he hadn't since childhood, the feeling of belonging to a family. The old woman told funny stories about Leo, who was in his room watching cartoons, while Ava asked casual questions about his life, showing a genuine interest that disarmed him. What impressed him most was her naturalness. Nothing in her behavior indicated she felt superior or uncomfortable in the company of a man like him. Ava laughed at her grandmother's jokes, helped serve the coffee, and participated in the conversation as if she had known Jack for years. "What do you do for work?" she asked at one point. "Security," he replied, not technically lying. "Must be tough. Chicago is getting more dangerous every day." If only she knew, Jack thought, that he had been responsible for a considerable portion of that violence. It was when Leo appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas with his hair sticking up from sleep, that Jack understood why he had risked everything for this family. The boy was too thin for his 12 years, with large, expressive eyes like his grandmother's. When Mrs. Eleanor explained that this was the man who helped buy your medicine, Leo approached shyly and whispered a thank you that almost broke Jack's heart. "Do you like video games?" the boy asked. And soon the two were in the small bedroom, playing a soccer game on the used PlayStation 2 that Leo had gotten as a gift from his sister. While they played, Jack listened to Ava and Mrs. Eleanor talking in the kitchen. The granddaughter spoke of important meetings and board decisions, but always vaguely. There was something in the way she talked about work that suggested much greater responsibilities than she let on. "Grandma, I have to go now," Ava announced after an hour, "but I'll be back on the weekend for lunch." She said goodbye to Leo, with a kiss on the forehead, and to Jack's surprise, extended her hand to him again. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Jack. I hope we see each other again." He watched from the window as she walked to a white sedan parked on the street. The car was simple, fitting for the neighborhood, but Jack noticed details that betrayed quality: new tires, flawless paint, professional window tinting. Ava drove with the same naturalness. She did everything, but there was something calculated in the choice of that car, as if she deliberately chose not to draw attention. Jack spent the rest of the morning with Mrs. Eleanor and Leo, feigning normality as his deadline expired. The old woman prepared a hearty lunch and insisted he eat like a person, complaining that he was too thin. Leo showed him his school drawings and talked about his plans to be a soccer player when he grew up. It was the happiest afternoon Jack had experienced in years, and also the most painful, because he knew it would be the last. When he said goodbye, Mrs. Eleanor held his hands tightly. "Jack, my son, you will always be welcome in this house. If you ever need anything, a chat, a plate of food, you come here. Promise?" He promised, knowing he was lying. Jack spent the night in a hotel near the airport but couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ava's face, the gratitude in Leo's eyes, the unconditional affection of Mrs. Eleanor. For the first time in his adult life, he had found people who made him want to be a better man. At 5 a.m, he made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to run. If Marcus wanted him gone, he would have to kill him. But before that, Jack was going to find out who Ava really was, and why a woman with her natural elegance and quiet sophistication lived between two such different worlds. He cancelled his flight to Miami and rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park under a false identity. He got a job as a night security guard at a cleaning company, an honest job that gave him time during the day to think and plan. 3 weeks later, he returned to Mrs. Eleanor's house with fruit and sweets for Leo. The old woman received him as if he were a son, returning from a trip, asking no questions about his absence. And when Ava arrived for Sunday lunch, she found Jack helping Leo with a jigsaw puzzle in the living room. This time, she wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, and when she smiled upon seeing him, Jack knew he was lost, completely, hopelessly lost. Sundays at Mrs. Eleanor's house became sacred for Jack. For 6 consecutive weeks, he appeared punctually at 11 a.m, always bringing a gift for Leo and helping the old woman with small household repairs, and always, without fail, Ava arrived at noon for the family lunch. With each meeting, Jack discovered new layers of her personality. Ava had a gift for asking questions that seemed casual but revealed genuine interest. She asked about his childhood, his tastes, his opinions on various subjects, always listening with an attention that made him feel important. He, in turn, learned to decipher the signals she let slip. Her phone rang frequently, and the conversations were always professional, conducted with a natural authority that contrasted with her youth. "Move the meeting to Tuesday," she would say, "or I won't accept less than a 15% stake." When she noticed Jack was paying attention, she would quickly change the subject, but not before he noted the weight of the responsibilities she carried. It was during the 6th Sunday that Mrs. Eleanor had a diabetic crisis. Jack was helping Leo with his math homework when they heard a crash in the kitchen. They found the old woman on the floor, conscious but too weak to get up, shaking and sweating coldly. Ava, who had arrived minutes before, was already on the phone with 911, her voice firm but laden with barely disguised panic. "Her blood sugar is very low," the paramedic explained while administering a glucose drip. "She'll need to be under observation for a few hours at the hospital." At County General Hospital, Jack saw a completely different side of Ava. The woman who always carried herself with discreet elegance, transformed into a force of nature, demanding detailed medical information, questioning procedures, and ensuring her grandmother received the best possible care. When a nurse suggested Mrs. Eleanor wait on a gurney in the hallway, Ava simply said no, with an authority that made the man back down immediately. "How did you get a private room in a public hospital?" Jack asked as they waited for the test results. Ava hesitated before answering. "I have some contacts in the healthcare sector. I work with, corporate philanthropy." It was a half-truth, he realized. Just like so many other things about her that didn't quite add up. They spent the whole night at the hospital. Mrs. Eleanor slept most of the time, sedated by the medication, while Leo dozed in the armchair next to the bed. Jack and Ava took turns between the room and the hallway, talking in whispers so as not to wake the others. It was during one of these late-night conversations that the barriers between them began to crumble. Ava spoke of the loneliness of growing up without parents, of how she learned to be strong too early, of the constant fear of losing her grandmother, her only true family. Jack, in turn, told her about his childhood in juvenile hall after his grandmother died, about how crime became his only prospect for survival, about the emptiness he felt despite all the money and power he had gained. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back at me," he confessed at 3 in the morning while they drank bad coffee from the hospital vending machine. "I spent so much time pretending to be someone I wasn't that I forgot who I really am." "And who do you want to be?" Ava asked, her green eyes fixed on his with an intensity that left him breathless. "Someone worthy of sitting here talking to you," he replied before he could even think. The silence that followed was charged with a tension they both felt, but neither had the courage to name. Ava reached out and lightly touched his hand, a contact that lasted only seconds but burned like fire on Jack's skin. The next morning, with Mrs. Eleanor stable and cleared to go home, Jack offered to help with her care. Ava accepted, and so began their most intense period of living together. For 2 weeks, he spent his mornings at the old woman's house, ensuring she took her medicine on time, ate properly, and didn't overexert herself. Ava appeared every day after work, always bringing something. Special fruits, magazines for her grandmother, new games for Leo. It was during these afternoon visits that Jack began to notice the details that didn't make sense. Her clothes, though simple, were made of expensive fabrics and had perfect cuts. The watch she wore was discreet, but he recognized the Swiss brand. Her shoes were always impeccable, clearly custom-made. Even more intriguing was the contrast between her natural ease in any environment and the moments she betrayed herself. Like when she answered her phone in fluent French, or when she casually mentioned having spent a few years studying in Europe, Udul, or when Leo asked why she never took them to see where she lived, and Ava changed the subject so quickly it was obvious she was hiding something important. The truth was discovered by chance. Jack was waiting for the bus on the Magnificent Mile after a doctor's appointment with Mrs. Eleanor when he saw Ava leaving the headquarters of the Sterling Group, one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. She wasn't dressed in her usual simplicity, but in an impeccable dark grey suit, her hair tied in an elegant bun, and the posture of someone who commanded the place. 2 men in suits accompanied her, clearly senior executives, speaking to her with a respectful and slightly reverential tone. A chauffeur held the door of a black armored BMW as she approached. When she got into the car, Jack managed to read the diplomatic plates and understood he was dealing with something much bigger than he had imagined. That night, He researched the Sterling Group on the internet at the hospital during his break from his security job. What he discovered left him stunned. Ava Sterling wasn't just a rich heiress. She was one of the most powerful women in America. At 29, she controlled a business empire valued in the billions, with investments in hospitality, construction, technology, and renewable energy. Her official photos on the company websites showed a sophisticated and imposing woman. But Jack recognized the green eyes, the discreet smile, the piercing intelligence he had known in Mrs. Eleanor's modest kitchen. The same woman who prepared breakfast for her grandmother and helped Leo with his homework was also the CEO who had closed a $200 million deal with European investors the previous week. The weight of the discovery was overwhelming. Jack realized he had fallen in love with a woman completely out of his league, someone who lived in a universe as distant from his as the moon from the earth. Worse still, he understood that she had deliberately hidden her identity, which meant she didn't trust him enough to be honest about who she really was. For 3 days, he avoided Mrs. Eleanor's house, claiming problems at work. He needed time to process the information and decide how to proceed. Ava was a billionaire. He was an ex-con marked for death. She controlled a business empire. He worked as a night security guard. The chasm between them was insurmountable. It was Leo who brought him back. The boy showed up at the building where Jack worked, having taken 3 buses to get there. "Grandma's worried because you disappeared," he said, with the raw honesty of childhood. "She said you must be sad about something, and that sadness can't be cured alone." Jack returned to Mrs. Eleanor's house the following Sunday and found Ava waiting for him in the living room. She was nervous, he noticed, her hands clasped in her lap and a tension in her shoulders he had never seen before. "We need to talk," she said, as soon as they were alone in the kitchen. "Yes, we do," he agreed, "especially about who you really are, Ava Sterling." Her full name coming from his mouth made her turn pale. For a moment, Jack saw genuine fear in her eyes, as if she feared he would use that information against her in some way. "How did you find out?" she asked in a low voice. "I saw you leaving your building on the Mag Mile. It's not hard to put 2 and 2 together." Ava took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a vulnerability that cut Jack's heart. "I wanted you to know me first, as a person, not as a CEO or an heiress. I wanted you to see who I really am when I'm not playing a role." "And who are you really?" "Mrs. Eleanor's granddaughter who makes breakfast on Sundays and worries about you when you disappear for 3 days," she replied, tears shining in her eyes. "Everything we've experienced together is real, Jack. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment, that's not a lie." In that instant, with tears running down her face and the raw honesty in her voice, Jack understood he was even more lost than he had imagined, because Ava was right. What they felt for each other was real, regardless of the social differences that separated them. What neither of them knew was that their closeness had already attracted the attention of dangerous people, and that Jack's past was about to collide violently with both of their presents. The revelation about Ava's identity changed the dynamic between them, but not in the way Jack expected. Instead of creating distance, it brought a raw honesty that drew them even closer. She began to speak openly about the pressures of business, about ambitious uncles who questioned her leadership, about the loneliness that power brought into her life. Jack, in turn, began to share details of his past that he had never shared with anyone. Over the next 3 weeks, they developed a dangerous intimacy. Long lunches at Mrs. Eleanor's house turned into conversations that stretched into the afternoon, while Leo played in the yard and the old woman napped in her armchair. Jack told her about the emotional scars he carried, about the men he had killed and the weight it had on his conscience. Ava spoke of business decisions that affected thousands of jobs. of the constant fear of failing and disappointing her parents' memory. It was during a particularly hot afternoon in May that the tension between them finally exploded. Mrs. Eleanor had gone to the doctor with a neighbor, and Leo was at school. Jack was fixing a kitchen faucet when Ava arrived early from work, tense from a difficult meeting with international investors. "They think because I'm a woman and young, I can be easily manipulated," she vented, sitting at the kitchen table while watching Jack work. "If it were my cousin John in the president's chair, they wouldn't question every decision." "You're smarter and more determined than any man I've ever met," Jack replied without taking his eyes off the faucet. "They're the ones who can't see it." When he turned to grab a tool, he found Ava right behind him, so close he could smell the delicate perfume she wore. Her eyes shone with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. "Jack," she whispered, and that was all they needed. The kiss happened with the force of weeks of repressed tension, his hands still dirty with grease. He found her face as she clung to his shirt as if he were her anchor in a storm. It was desperate, hungry, filled with all the impossibility of their love and the certainty that in that moment, nothing else existed but the two of them. When they separated, they were both trembling. Ava rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed, her breathing ragged. "This can't happen," she whispered. "I know," he replied, but his hands still held her face. "My life is too complicated, too exposed. If anyone finds out about us—" "I know," he repeated, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity of the previous moment. But they knew it was too late. What they felt for each other had crossed every line, and there was no going back. The happiness lasted exactly 6 days. The following Monday, Jack was leaving work when two men approached him in the parking lot. He recognized one of them immediately, Charlie, an old associate of Marcus's who had always envied and hated him in silence. "Look who's living the good life," Charlie said, lighting a cigarette. "I heard you've been spending time with a good family, Jack. A very good family indeed." Jack's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Ava Sterling. Billionaire, heiress, one of the richest women in America, and you, a former mob enforcer, hanging around her grandma's house like you're part of the family." Charlie showed him some photos taken with a cell phone. Jack entering Mrs. Eleanor's house, leaving the hospital with Ava, the two of them talking on the porch during one of their Sunday lunches. "Marcus got very interested when he heard about this, especially when we found out the princess's uncles are getting desperate to oust her from the company's presidency. It seems some businessman would love to do business with someone who has influence over the young lady." The trap had been set for weeks. While Jack believed he was protected by anonymity, old enemies were tracking him, discovering his new life, identifying his only weakness. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Use his relationship with Ava to blackmail her, forcing her to sell her stake in the company to businessmen connected to organized crime. If she doesn't cooperate, we'll expose her relationship with a known criminal. Imagine the media scandal, international investors fleeing, shareholders losing confidence. The little princess will lose everything. And if she cooperates, Jack asked, though he already knew the answer, then you become a problem that needs to be eliminated. We can't leave living witnesses who know too much about our operation. Jack had 24 hours to decide, betray Ava or die trying to protect her. That night, he wrote a letter explaining everything, about his past, about the dangers he had brought into her life, about how he had fallen madly in love, but understood he needed to disappear to protect her. He planned to leave the letter at Mrs. Eleanor's house and vanish from the city, maybe even the country, before anyone could use his love as a weapon against her. But Ava arrived at his apartment at 2 a.m, using the key he had given her the week before. She found him packing his few belongings and read the letter that was on the table. "You're an idiot if you think I'm going to let you run away alone," she said after reading everything. tears streaming down her face, but her voice firm with determination. "Ava, you don't understand. These men will destroy your life to get to me. Then we'll destroy them first." Over the next 6 hours, Ava showed why she became the CEO of a billion-dollar empire at 29. She used her contacts in politics and law enforcement to secure police protection for Jack in exchange for the information he had on money laundering. She mobilized lawyers specializing in organized crime to document the threats. She hired a private security firm to protect Mrs. Eleanor and Leo. But the smartest move was to publicly expose her relationship with Jack before their enemies could use it for blackmail. In a press conference called to announce new company investments, Ava ended by saying she was engaged to Jack Sullivan, a man who had turned his life around and was cooperating with the justice system to dismantle criminal organizations. "The past does not define who we are," she declared to the stunned journalists. "It defines who we choose to become." The reaction was explosive. Some investors pulled out, scandalized. Others were impressed by her courage and honesty. The media was divided between criticism and praise. But one thing was certain: no one could use that information as blackmail anymore. Marcus and Charlie were arrested 3 days later, along with dozens of other members of the organization, based on the detailed information Jack provided to the authorities. Ava's uncles, exposed as being involved in the conspiracy, were removed from the company and prosecuted for attempted fraud. 6 months later, Jack was free from the threats of his past, but still struggling to find his place in the new world. The witness protection program gave him a new identity, but Ava managed to ensure he could maintain contact with the people he loved. Mrs. Eleanor, deliriously happy, insisted on organizing the wedding in the small neighborhood church where she had married her late husband 60 years earlier. "Wealth doesn't need a big party," she declared. "Love needs family." Leo, now 13 and fully recovered, would be the ring bearer. He had become Jack's biggest fan after learning that he had defeated the bad guys like a movie hero. The ceremony took place on a sunny October morning. Ava wore a simple but elegant dress, specially chosen not to clash with the humble setting of the little church. Jack, in a dark suit, waited at the altar with tears in his eyes as he watched the woman he loved walk down the aisle to the sound of an out-of-tune organ. During their vows, he promised to be worthy of the love he had received and to use his second chance to build something beautiful. She promised to love him not despite his past, but because of the courage he had to change it. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the small group of guests, Mrs. Eleanor, Leo, a few loyal company employees, and 2 police detectives who had become friends during the process, erupted in applause. 2 years later, Jack worked as a security consultant for companies fighting money laundering, using his knowledge of organized crime to protect legitimate businesses. Ava had expanded the family business into social areas, creating job training programs for ex-convicts and at-risk youth. They lived in a comfortable but not ostentatious house in a nice neighborhood, close enough to Inglewood for Mrs. Eleanor to visit whenever she wanted. Leo spent weekends with them, studying at a private school that Ava discreetly paid for, but still living with his grandmother because she refused to abandon the neighborhood where she was happy her whole life. One Sunday afternoon, while they watched Leo play soccer in the backyard and Mrs. Eleanor prepared her famous chicken noodle soup, Ava nestled into Jack's arm on the living room sofa. "Do you regret anything?" she asked, looking at the simple wedding band he insisted on wearing. "Only that it took me so long to find you," he replied, kissing the top of her head. Outside, Chicago remained a city of extreme contrasts, where wealth and poverty coexisted, separated by invisible walls. But inside that house, in the love they built together, Jack and Ava had proven that some barriers can be broken when there is enough courage to try. Their story became a quiet legend among those who knew them, proof that true love can blossom in the most unlikely places and transform even the lives most marked by fate. And that sometimes redemption comes in the form of a diabetic old woman who needs help buying medicine, paving the way for miracles that not even the most creative screenwriters would dare to imagine. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.